Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona. And before we get started today, I would like to make a little announcement about upcoming events. And one of them is on December 26th, about 1 p.m. Pacific time, we will begin a 5-day retreat, which will last until the morning of January 1st, Pacific time. And you're welcome to join. It will be on YouTube on this channel, and it will be for the full 5 days. I will be giving a talk every day, and we'll be having a tea time, question and answer every day as well. And this will be something like this live stream Q&A. So dial in for that. And there will be no live stream question and answer next week on the, whatever it is, the 18th or 19th. So we will skip that, but we will be back for a steady dose of a full immersion retreat online. So this is something you can do at home, and it will be something full day events every day for that period of time. So look forward to that, and there's no need to make any specific application, but we appreciate it if you actually let us know that you're engaging in that retreat, so that we have a sense of the numbers of people and where you're from who are interested in having such a retreat. The retreat topics are primarily on what we would call the blessings of life, how to create a more blessed life, what you can do to bless your own life and the lives of those around you. So there are many strategies and helpful advice from the Buddhist teaching for that purpose. So perhaps you'll join us then. Now, let's get on with our present question and answers. Pia, please.
Ajahn, first I just want to mention I've posted a link to our website and the specific page for our virtual retreat in the chat, so you can go there and you'll find more information posted now, and we will also be adding more information leading up to the retreat. So our first question today is from Jason in Knutsford, British Columbia, Canada. The Buddha teaches the end of suffering, but I do not understand what suffering actually is. Can you help in clarifying this?
Yeah, it's probably the most important bit of information you're going to have. And this is the first noble truth. There is suffering. So, or let's put it in Pali, there is dukkha. Dukkha is. Dukkha is a nuanced word. It's something that we expound on because a lot of people have trouble understanding, well, life is not all suffering. I have happy moments. I'm not always suffering. Some people think that maybe they won't suffer very much at all in this life. So we have to understand that the Buddha is not saying life is suffering. He's saying that there is high potential, continuous potential for suffering, which is both physical and emotional. And so some of the things he talks about as our clear experiences which are painful are illness, aging, death, and then sorrow, grief, and lamentation over the events of life. So there's a number of ways, 1,000 ways to suffer. Now, you may go along being just fine for a period of time, and lots of people have all kinds of gifts, and they're born into wealth and ease and have good health, and then suddenly something changes, cancer or a tragic accident. Then they suddenly realize that what their happiness was dependent on is suddenly swept away. The Buddha is examining the large picture of life, the large possibilities of life. And he sees nowhere that there is safety in existence. There's no safe place in existence. Now, this comes as a bit of a startling message for some religious people and philosophers because, for instance, isn't heaven safe? Isn't heaven a place where you can go and be safe? And from the point of the Buddha's view, no, it is not. Whatever has the nature to arise has the nature to cease as well. This is kind of articulating something like the laws of cause and effect in the physical world, that something, requires energy to move, and that energy is depleted. There are various laws that suggest that the entire universe must move towards chaos and disorganization as energy depletes. So this is the universal law that the Buddha is talking about, that good times not only don't last, but can't last. And what follows the good times is rather unpredictable. So this becomes into human awareness. The humans have the capacity to imagine the future and remember the past. We don't know whether animals have the imagination of the future, but humans do. And so that's an underlying cause of such things as anxiety and worry and fear about things which might happen, could happen. So somebody has lots of money and health, and they have a really good relationship. Well, one of the things they can worry about is, if it's so good, if the relationship is so good, what would happen if their mate died or became sick or left them? So that the cause of their happiness becomes a cause for their worry. What would happen if they lost all their money? What would happen if they lost their health? So the things that they have, which they appreciate and which contribute to their happiness, are also the source of their unhappiness, because humans can imagine. They can project into the future to see. So this would be that all conditions of well-being are, in a sense, under stress. Now, it doesn't mean that you're stressed about it. It means that they're like mechanical stress. And I want to credit Ajahn Sona for that simile. Like certain bridges, metal bridges, are the metal in the bridge is pre-stressed, so it's constantly under weight, under stress. And in a sense, the human body is under stress from nature, from gravity, from the mere fact of walking around in an atmosphere. And the human psyche, which is fairly, in its natural state, is fairly primitive. It means that it seeks out rewards of food, clothing, shelter, medicine, a community, etc. Those are natural impulses to reproduce, etc. And those are under stress because all those factors can be instantly and easily changed. Natural disasters, pandemics. So we've just recently, the world is chugging along in certain directions. Everybody's making predictions about how it's going to go, and then zap, a worldwide pandemic comes and changes everything. So this can happen. Earthquakes happen. Weather situation, floods happen. Illness happens. When you think about it, there's a 1,000 unpredictable ways that the sources of your happiness, if they're based in circumstances, can be swept away from underneath you. So this is anxiety producing, stress producing. Some people, of course, forget about it for a period of time, but the fact that you're not thinking about the possibilities of what can happen to you and those you're attached to doesn't mean that it won't happen. And if you're not thinking about it, not prepared, it's even more of a shock. And some people never recover from those shocks. All kinds of people have had a failure in life, had a loss of a relationship, had a loss of a limb, then they never recover from that. Others are more resilient. So Buddhism is not about that it's inevitable to suffer. There are strategies and tactics which will give you much more resilience and prevent suffering, but you need contact with reality. So the first thing that Buddhism introduces you to is all the ways that things can go wrong, all the ways that things are not stable, are not certain, are prone to being out of control. So that's kind of the opposite language which people use. Quite often people endlessly try to persuade each other and themselves that everything's under control. That's what we would like to hear. When the pilot comes on, when the plane is bumpy, the pilot comes on and say, ladies and gentlemen, everything's under control. And of course, it's never true. There's no such thing as being under control. The universe is out of control, out of our command and our control. So that's the first mission, is to find the truth of the matter. And it's different than what people say it is. Most people avoid this kind of language because it's pessimistic. They think it's pessimistic. It's not pessimistic, it's realistic. And if it was merely realistic, maybe you would think it would be better to avoid talking about it, that it's morbid to talk about it, but it's because we can do something about our attitudes. Now, we can't stop the fact of illness, aging, death, but we can reconstitute our psychology and our reactions towards all of these events so that emotionally we're not devastated by these things. So that, in brief, is the first truth of suffering, and which is the central truth and concern of the Buddha and his teachings. Everything converges in that truth of suffering. And then there's one other truth, thank goodness, the end of suffering. It is possible to come to the end of this dukkha, suffering, pain, stress, potential for suffering. So that is the contents of the Eightfold Path, which brings us to the end of that. So it's a great question, and it's a great issue to dwell on for all of you out there. Investigate deeply this condition of potential suffering, that it's intrinsic, it's woven into the experience of existence. Inextricably, you cannot avoid it in terms of the fragility and vulnerability of what it is to be in existence. So let's go on to our next question, Pia.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live chat from Gabrielle. Dear Ajahn, in raising the wholesome factors in right effort, how do we cultivate and hold the Brahma Viharas without turning it into grasping? What does a skillful response look like? Anumodana.
Well, at first, because if we're not fully enlightened, we will be grasping. But the Buddha does say that don't hesitate to cultivate these positive emotional states. Now, Gabrielle mentioned Brahma Viharas. So for the sake of the audience, I want to explain a little bit about this. These are emotional states, attitudes towards all beings in the world. So the first of them is loving kindness, without any conditions, without any strings attached. Second is compassion for those who are suffering. that is loving, a type of loving kindness for those who are suffering, no strings attached. And then happiness for those who are happy. Loving kindness for those who are happy, celebration of their joy. That's sympathetic joy. That's the third of the Brahma Viharas. And the last one is equanimity, a sterling quality of balanced, stable emotions in the midst of the turmoils of life, of success and failure, of fame and obscurity, of good fortune and bad fortune. These are the conditions which we call that a Brahma Vihara. Now, Brahma Vihara means the dwellings of the gods. How do you enter the dwellings of the gods? Through love and stability of personality, types of wisdom and good-hearted emotion. Now, you can't start without attachment. You start from the point of attachment. So this is the problem. The roots of suffering are your attachments. But the cultivation of these Brahma Viharas, these divine emotions, is the cause for the dwindling of your attachments. Another way to talk about attachments is the word avidya, or ignorance. We are unskillful and not wise in our relationship to the world around us. We respond to the world around us with negative, unfortunate emotions like greed, hatred, and it's because we are fundamentally deluded. We don't understand realistically the nature of reality. And so these problematic emotions of greed and hatred arise from that. The Brahma Viharas are the opposite of greed and hatred. So they're loving kindness and a kind of balanced serenity. So they undercut the grasping of greed and the repulsion of hatred, anger, aversion, irritability, all of these things, anything on the negative emotional side, they're the opposite of. So it's all right that you are grasping at them, cultivating them, holding them, because they're causing the negative emotions to melt, to dwindle, to become weaker and weaker. And so not feeding our ignorance, basically our delusions about reality, causes them to weaken. And when we dwell constantly in loving kindness and compassion, sympathetic joy and equanimity, we do not feed the roots of our negative emotions. We do the opposite, and so they reduce, and eventually we're able to break our attachments. If we don't do those positive emotions first, if we don't overcome our negative emotions, the negative emotions, by the way, feed our delusions, our attachments. They increase the strength of them. When we indulge in anger and greed, we strengthen our ignorance. When we diminish these and replace them with the positive emotions of loving kindness and equanimity, etc., then we weaken our ignorance. We become wiser, more in touch with reality, have greater understanding of skill in life. So that's the approach. So don't worry about attachment to them. They eventually will help undo the essential problem of attachment itself. They are a means to an end. And by the way, after the end, when you have no attachments, guess what persists? The Brahma Viharas, the positive emotions of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity persist. The Buddha had those and regularly dwelled in them. The Arahants, the fully enlightened people, dwell in those things, but they are no longer attached. Doesn't mean that they don't enter those things. They enter and are free in the midst of them. Okay, so Pia. Next question.
Ajahn, the next question is from Stephen in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, United States. Dear Ajahn Sona, you have said that a benefit of practicing metta is that your dreams will be sweeter. I have been experiencing this with superabundant wild or mild dreams every night, wonderfully absent of anxiety or threat, and been writing down images and stories. Is there guidance in the Dhamma or monastic practice on how to work with dreams?
Yes. So the first three benefits of the deep practice of loving kindness. There's a sutta called the 11 Benefits of Loving Kindness. The first three are: one sleeps well, one wakes well, one has no bad dreams. So loving kindness is the key to good sleep, actually. And there's a lot of interest in why people have trouble sleeping, and of course, disturbed sleep, nightmares, and so forth. Psychology, starting with Freud and perhaps earlier, has been very interested in the nature of dreams and what dreams mean. What did Freud call it? The royal road to the unconscious. However, Buddhism is not particularly interested in the contents of dreams. They consider it to be a side effect of the natural workings of the mind. And if the workings of the mind are not developed and skillful, there'll be all kinds of chaotic and rather meaningless events, which we would call dreams. These are, as a meditator, you will see that even when you're wide awake, attempting to meditate, you're going to be in a kind of a state of quasi-dreaming. All kinds of chaotic, senseless material will well up in the mind, and you will all kinds of irrelevant material. You've been asked to say, watch your breath or practice loving kindness, and then you will proceed to do the exact opposite. You'll be swept away into a stream of uncontrolled and undisciplined kind of consciousness. This is happening as people walk around in ordinary life. They're in a kind of a waking daydream. And that daydream can be even nightmarish because of negative emotions. So the primary antidote to this is positive emotions that you cultivate all day long as you can, systematically, without needing events around you to be positive. You cultivate this positive emotion of loving kindness towards this world, which and all the beings in it, without asking that they be worthy of your loving kindness. The primary beneficiary of loving kindness is you. So you do this, and it changes the way your consciousness works. And if you do this strongly enough, frequently enough, deeply enough, then when you go to sleep, it will persist. And loving kindness creates, in the dream state, it creates sense of safety within the dreams, and also more like symmetry and beauty in the dreams. So the descriptions of heavens in the Buddhist suttas, there are monks, and the Buddha himself says that they visit heaven. They actually go into heaven and talk to beings in heaven and see beings in heaven. And the nature of these beings is they're exquisitely beautiful and radiant, full of light and beauty, unimaginable kind of symmetry and exquisite beauty. This is what the mind does with this positive emotion of loving kindness. It creates symmetry, order, exquisite beauty. The opposite happens with negative emotions such as hatred and fear. It creates darkness and ugliness. And so you'll see that that's the nature of what is, when artists attempt to express hellish visions, there are strange, misshapen, and dark kind of beings and circumstances, like heavy terrible ghettos versus beautiful mansions. So this is what loving kindness can do. It can transform the quality of the visions that you have in your dreams. As far as analyzing dreams, the Buddha does not analyze dreams. What he says is that the royal road to the unconscious is not dreams, but loving kindness, is the practice of mindfulness, of right mindfulness, of lucidity while you're conscious. And this transforms that which is unconscious, that which appears in dreams. So don't look for information about who you are or what you are in your dreams. Look to transform who you are and what you are by conscious effort during your waking hours. This, by the way, is not exclusively Buddhist advice. You'll find this advice even from Socrates, who says that before you go to sleep, you should read some uplifting literature, something that inspires you and creates positive emotions, and that's what you should go to sleep on. So this is not unknown amongst the wise, that it's important to set your mind in the right place and attitude before sleeping. This is particularly useful and good advice for people these days because they watch all kinds of media that captivates your attention because it's bad news. It creates anxiety and fear and so forth. And you think that you're obliged to keep up on events. But actually, the representation of the world through a few bad events is not how the world really is. And it's not very good for you to fall asleep on. So you should withdraw from that kind of focus in media an hour or more before you go to sleep. I mean, I'd give it up altogether, but you should do something in the positive direction before falling asleep. At least the last hour of your day should be spent in a positive, shaping your mind in a very positive way. Do it as an experiment and see what happens. Okay, back to Pia.
Ajahn, our next question is from Tiara from the live chat. I am caring for several elders who are declining in health. Because they don't have a spiritual practice, they are very uncomfortable with illness and death. What could I do or say to help them?
Well, you can hold out the hope that you may help them, but this is also part of our practice, is realizing that, if people let their whole life go by without attending to these, more or less, some sort of philosophical grounding, some sort of grounding in wisdom and understanding, then they may be a little bit out of reach. And we ourselves as practitioners have to reconcile ourselves to the fact that some people will not be reached with this. And it's not possible there's no magic way of changing a person's mind, especially late in life like that. I would say not to intrude too much on their belief system, but the main encouragement is to encourage them to remember moments of their life that were happy and that they did something good, and to discourage them from thinking about negative things, about failings or old wounds that they had that were inflicted on them or that they inflicted on others. So keep their mind away from negative memories. It's apparently not obvious to the Western world that brooding over injustice and negative actions on our part is not about truth later in life. It's a dangerous activity. It just pulls you into a negative mood. So you want to pull away from it. You have a choice about what you think about. And so, but people need a confident assertion. So this is what you should be, very confident in your tone of voice, saying, dear, do not think about negative things. It is not a good thing. It's not important. Those things need to be let go of and forgotten. But you did many, many small and beautiful and some major good things. Everybody has done some good things in their life. You want to say, they might even ask you, what good things? I haven't done anything good. Well, did you ever say good morning? Did you ever say, share a cup of coffee? Sure, you did good things. Thousands of good things. Did you ever smile in your entire life? Did you ever laugh at a joke? Did you ever tell a joke? You know, a few things. So the good things don't have to be dramatic, but there are many of those things, and you have to focus on those good things. It changes your attitude. It uplifts you. And you have to tell them, you have a choice. You have a choice. You can, if you go into the negative things, you will be depressed. And why would you want that? If you go into these positive things, then you will not be. Your sense of pain and sadness and so forth will be lifted. And you will have a sense of non-fear. And this will be good for your mental health and for your physical health. Your body likes it when you're not anxious, worried, sad. It likes it. Your immune system likes it, so you will be healthier. And you will diminish your fear of death as well. The fear of death is not intrinsically fearful. It's how you look at it. And it's primarily that you believe the fear emotion changes the way you think. So fear is the problem itself. So when we think about positive things in life, and also especially loving things, love that we've had with other people and maybe even with our pets, you know, this changes and reduces fear in the body. Fear can't coexist with positive emotions, especially loving kindness, goodwill. It doesn't coexist, it diminishes. So the fear of death goes away when you have loving kindness in your system. So this is all you can do, but don't set yourself up for failure, because not everybody will be receptive to this. But when you do talk to them, talk in a very confident way and assure them it will work 100%. It's not even religious in a sense, it's just psychology. Positive emotions relieve fear. Okay.
Our next question is from Jesse from Los Angeles, California, United States. During your Vesak talk, you said to imitate the Arahant. Is there any way you can tell which of the 4 stages of enlightenment a monk has attained? You don't have merit badges, wink. I know you have said that a monk may speak to a superior about his experience for guidance. My guess is that as a layperson, I don't really have to know. Pick a monk, any monk, and imitate?
Well, lay people quite often speculate about monks' attainments. So-and-so is an arahant, so-and-so is a stream entry, so-and-so is not enlightened, so-and-so is enlightened. This is a guessing game. That certain monks have fan clubs and they think that their monk is enlightened and must be, and so forth. And sometimes they're disappointed. And other monks who are obscure and nobody's ever heard of are, in fact, deeply enlightened. So it's not profitable to guess about this. In terms of the imitation of the Arahant, it's not. I think that I suggested basically that you act as in an enlightened fashion. Even if you're not enlightened, act enlightened. You will then be asking yourself the question, well, how does the enlightened person deal with this situation? And that helps you. It makes you progress towards that. So when I say imitate the Arahant, I mean model yourself on enlightened behavior. And in order to, now you may find attributes, beautiful behavior in certain monks, and also look for it in lay people. Some lay people have very beautiful qualities as well that you admire and aspire to. But check it out with the suttas to see if that it accords with the Buddha's description. And there are many good descriptions of enlightened behavior, enlightened speech, how the enlightened person feels and thinks and speaks and acts. And you can find that in the suttas. And then if you find some living examples of that, that's all the better. But as I say, you can't, as a layperson, very difficult to assess another person's mind. The Buddha actually talks about this. He says, how do you know another person? You don't read their mind. You know them by their speech and by their actions. And then only after a long time and seeing them under different circumstances. That's how you get to know another person. And only, of course, if you have some basis for recognizing the difference between skill and lack of skill. So you get your information from the suttas about what a skilled person is, what is skillful, what is not skillful. And then you can look around for models of that in speech and action. But don't trust your sense of reading somebody, guessing about somebody's mind. It's not a game that you're going to win. So that's a little advice regarding this question.
Ajahn, our next question is from Sumrit. Ajahn, how to differentiate between indifference and disenchantment? Sometimes I feel disenchanted with the world, but wonder if it may be indifference.
Yeah, well, they're not all that dissimilar. They might overlap in some ways, but it's not. Disenchantment is not necessarily depression or a lack of energy. You can be disenchantment is to outgrow your delusions, outgrow your childish preoccupations with things in the world, you know. Children go through these stages automatically. They grow out of big plastic toys into something more sophisticated. They go into a bicycle and they love that bicycle, and then eventually they want a car, and etc. Some people, of course, never grow up. They never get past love of toys and things like this. Others do. But it doesn't mean that they're depressed or sad or unmotivated or lost their appetite. It means that they have a wiser view of things. And this view of what's called disenchantment should not be a form of deflation of energy. It's very clear that some of the factors of the enlightened mind, one of them in particular is joy. The freedom from being entangled in all these things. That you feel you don't need all of these things. They're fine. You know, they're not your enemies. They're just things in the world. And you know that some people are going through stages where they're delighted by these various acquiring and some their delusions. They worship their youth, they worship their strength, they worship their intelligence, they worship their possessions. Oh yes, well, they will play in that realm, but if the wise person knows that these things pass, and if you're totally immersed in them, then you will be very distraught when they do. But that wise person is not moping around. They feel light and unburdened and free, and joy naturally arises. A lightness of heart naturally arises. So make sure that your disenchantment is just not a flat experience or unemotional or anything like that. The emotion of joy and love and so forth persist in the enlightened person. But they're not burdened and worried. There's not much fear in them. They've gone beyond these things, and they float through life. They feel very light and well. So look for that, as a way.
Ajahn, our next question is from Kanti in Amman, Jordan. My question is, if a being attains one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, what will happen to the people who helped this being, either by showing the path or teaching? Will they get positive karma?
Yes, it is very good karma to teach. It is the greatest of the gifts. So this is the Buddha talks about various powers that he has, kind of miraculous, what you call miraculous powers of being able to see into other dimensions of existence and to recall vast periods of time and to understand things. But he says the greatest of his gifts is the ability to teach people and to teach them how to improve their life, to reduce the suffering in the lives of others. So this is the Dhamma dana. Dana is D-A-N-A is the word for generosity. And it can take all kinds of forms. And one of the first forms, of course, is offering food and sharing food with others. So everybody needs food. Everybody in the entire universe, everything in the entire universe runs on food of some type. In other words, some form of energy. And so anybody can do that. Even children, 3 and 4 years old, if they're taught to share a cookie or something like that, they get a reward right away. They get a warm feeling that they can make other people happy. And then you can share knowledge. Of course, teachers at school share their information about how to read and how to write, how to do mathematics, and the skills of life. This is very beautiful. And unfortunately, in the West, the teachers are not, those people who spend their lives teaching you the basics of life are not appreciated as much as they should be. But they will be rewarded. Teachers will be rewarded. But the highest of these teachings is Dhamma, to give the Dhamma, to impart the Dhamma that alleviates suffering in a clear enough way that people can benefit by it. So the person works on their own delivery of teachings of Dhamma, and every time they do this, they have enormous positive repercussions. They themselves are rewarded deeply from this. And they themselves actually, as they're explaining things, sometimes they also gain insight into the thing that they're explaining. They can teach themselves while they're teaching others. So, yes, there are enormous benefits from sharing good advice for others, because these are, if you understand the principles of how to be happy, to impart that to another person is much greater than just giving a meal to them. It lasts their whole life. Okay.
Our next question is from Rick on the live chat from Indiana, United States. Ajahn, how do we maintain strong faith and resolve in our practice of the Buddha's path without clinging to fixed views and without being in conflict with others' beliefs?
I think it's important not to worry about it too much. You will be attached. You will have your opinions. You will be in conflict. It's all right. Don't try to be perfect right out of the gate. Laugh at yourself a little bit. Say, boy, that really got me. When that person criticized the Buddha or dismissed my views, that really got me. Well, you have to think about it as that was the Buddha testing you. So that guy on the street or the guy at the dinner table, that's the Buddha testing you. And just keep a lightness, a sense of humor about it. Eventually you'll become confident in the teachings. You'll become confident that you are on the right track and that what you are saying is correct, and you don't have to defend it. You're not. It's like somebody arguing that 2 and 2 is not 4. Well, you know it's 4. And when they say it's not 4, then you say, well, you're just wrong, that's all. I mean, you don't have to get angry about it. It's easy to make mistakes about basic facts of life. So that's the way. And this is, to try to maintain this perfect detachment and equanimity right out of the gate is very difficult. But just treat yourself with some sense of humor, and don't expect it to be that easy. Eventually, you will become more detached. You will have views and opinions. The difference is whether you're attached to them, so that if somebody contradicts your views and opinions, has different views and opinions, you get upset about that. So it's not that you have no opinions or views. It's that you're clinging and grasping at them, and that produces negative emotions. So you have to practice that. In fact, you can even go and put yourself in a difficult situation where everybody in the room disagrees with you, and you got to go there and say, I don't have to be upset about this. I can just relax, and everybody else has a contrary opinion to me, and I still don't have to suffer. So you can practice that. Yeah.
Ajahn, our next question is from Smith in Maryland, United States. Could you please help a lay Buddhist understand how to navigate the precept of the non-taking of life as it relates to home ownership and insect control? What should one do if there is a home infestation of some sort of insect or animal?
That is a very difficult area, and it does require quite a bit of patience and consideration. The insect level is so numerous and so invasive and so difficult to manage. Without killing them is very hard. And so, first of all, not to be too overwrought about this. It is awkward, and it can change the value of your house and so forth. But you need to explore. And there are lots of people in the world that don't like to kill insects, and they have come up with strategies for dealing with these things. So you have to do some research and find out. The monks in the monasteries that I've been in have a very strong precept not to kill even an insect, a mosquito or an ant or any of these things, and they have developed various strategies for dealing with these things. And one of them is simply patience, because everybody else can just poison them, but you have to negotiate with them and so forth. I don't say that you'll always be successful in this. The last resort is that you yourself should not undertake the killing off of insects. Sometimes you have to ask some sort of agency that controls these things to make sure that you word it in the right way to maybe prevent the destruction of your house or something like this. But then they will take on that responsibility. Some people think that that's a transgression of the precept, but actually there's all kinds of people in this world who have no intention of giving up killing insects or killing animals or any of those things. And if they do that, if the result of that is that you have a better environment, it's not your individual karma. So your first tactic is to get information about how to deal with this as well as possible, and to be patient and realize that yes, you're kind of going through the world with one hand tied behind your back. Everybody else just gets to stamp on a spider or squash something, but to do this, yes, it is inconvenient, and it develops you. And eventually, actually, you can get to the point where you actually have some sensitivity to these little beings, because they are incredible, There's a Zen poem that says, "Do not kill the fly. Look, he washes his hands, he washes his feet." You see the fly, if you look at it closely, they rub their hands and feet, cleaning their hands and feet. They have to eat. They also concern, they have enough sense to do this. Yeah, very intelligent little beings, yeah.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live chat from Mo in Houston, Texas, United States. Dear Ajahn, I would like to be reborn as a human being and listen to the Buddha's teachings in person. What kind of merits should one do in order to be reborn as a human during the time of the next Buddha?
Yeah, that's not an uncommon aspiration in Asia. And the next Buddha is called Metteyya, or sort of a teacher of loving kindness. So that will be the dominant teaching. A lot of people who are just initially exposed to Buddha don't realize that there's a lot of cosmology in Buddhism, and there is another Buddha coming. By the way, it's not the return of this Buddha. It's you don't want to confuse it with Christianity, where Jesus comes back. The next Buddha will be a different Buddha, not this one, and not the one that we just had. That one is gone, and as he said near the time of his death, he said, "After my death, neither gods nor humans will see me." However, there is another one, apparently, who will arrive some indefinite time, and that the name, they even say that the name of that Buddha will be Metteyya. And there's a lot of people looking forward to being around at the time of Metteyya, so they can get, actually meet a Buddha. I mean, I don't think you should, I don't like that aspiration. I think you should aspire to get out as soon as you can, not wait for Metteyya. But if you're going to wait for Metteyya, then the aspiration is to watch your precepts, be virtuous, and to aspire to be reborn as a disciple of the next Buddha. And that's an aspiration which you kind of keep in your heart and in your mind, so that it's embedded in your consciousness, that you aspire to that. Yeah. Okay. I think we have time for one more question.
Yes, Ajahn. Our final question today is from S. in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Metta is core to Buddhism, which makes for a better way of living. The Dalai Lama has spoken too of, quote, stupid compassion. I would be grateful if you could please explain how, as a Buddhist, these two should be considered.
Yeah, I think that compassion is a skill. And the first thing we need to know about it, and this is particularly needs to be clarified this is the attitude of the Pali Canon, the teachings of the historical Buddha, that compassion is not a form of grief. It's not grief at the suffering of others. It's loving kindness for those who are suffering. So compassion is a beautiful emotion. You are actually experiencing well-being with compassion. And it allows you to interact and help beings who are suffering. And at the same time, you stay healthy. You don't burn out. You don't burn out. This is the problem. You see compassion mixed with grief. And that person will try to do good, try to fix things, try to prevent others from suffering, but they themselves are suffering during that. And that suffering eventually catches up to them, and they can't keep it up. And they fall into despair quite often. So people who are very socially conscious, socially active, quite often drift into despair. They drift into sometimes use of drugs and various things to help with their sense of futility and hopelessness. And that's a shame because they have good hearts, but they must understand that the universe is out of control. Suffering is intrinsic to existence, and that you can do all the good that you want to, but please don't think that the motivation should be grief and suffering. The other element of what could be called stupid compassion is just unskillful actions in order to help a person. So somebody is grieving over the loss of a boyfriend. Well, you say, let's go out drinking. I know how it feels. Let's go drink. So you're trying to be compassionate, but you don't have skillful means. You're encouraging a temporary and inadequate response to their suffering. You're encouraging them that way. And the other way is that you must, part of compassion has to be equanimity. Compassion, loving kindness has to be balanced with equanimity. In the midst of the tragedy of existence, you need to be steady and balanced, and not afraid to be aware of the tragedy of existence, the terrible suffering of some beings, to look on it with equanimity, with balance, and not to lose your balance. So whenever you have equanimity, compassion and loving kindness, it needs to be infused partially also with equanimity. And equanimity needs to be infused with warm good-heartedness as well. You don't turn into a stone-cold philosopher, one who is aloof and detached, but without warmth. And as far as the warmth part, don't turn into a bleeding heart, because you'll bleed to death. Your heart should be warm and juicy, and your head should be nice and cool and clear. And these go together very well. Warm heart, cool head. Beautiful combination. So keep that in mind, and then you won't be subject to stupid compassion. So I would like to again remind everybody that we have a retreat upcoming, the 26th of December to the 1st of January. And that next week we will not have a live stream Q&A because we are going to have all kinds of opportunities for questions and answers during that 5-day retreat. I will give a formal talk each night, and I will give a question and answer opportunity every day for 5 days in a row. And so stay tuned for that and keep an eye on it. This will be on Ajahn Sona YouTube channel, the one that you're watching right now. And we will see you then.